In the year 1975, American Motors Corporation unveiled what they believed would be their salvation in the compact car market. The Pacer was introduced with enormous fanfare, marketed as the first wide small car designed specifically for the American market. This vehicle was supposed to revolutionize the industry, bringing European-inspired design philosophy to American consumers who were desperately seeking fuel-efficient alternatives during the energy crisis. However, what AMC actually created was something automotive historians would later call one of the most spectacular failures in American automotive history. A car that cost the company $60 million to develop and ultimately contributed to AMC's eventual absorption by Chrysler. The Pacer's story begins several years before its launch, back in the early 1970s. AMC was struggling to compete with the big three automakers, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. The company needed something revolutionary, something that would capture the imagination of American buyers and establish AMC as an innovative force in the industry. The timing seemed perfect. The 1973 oil crisis had sent shockwaves through the automotive world, and suddenly, compact cars were no longer seen as cheap alternatives, but as necessities. Americans were lining up for fuel-efficient vehicles, and AMC's management believed they had identified a golden opportunity. The original concept for the Pacer was actually quite ingenious on paper. AMC's designers envisioned a car that would offer the interior space of a mid-size sedan while maintaining the footprint and fuel efficiency of a compact vehicle. To achieve this, they created an unusually wide body. The Pacer was 77 inches wide, but only 171 inches long. This gave the car its distinctive, almost bulbous appearance that some people found charming and others found deeply unsettling. The design featured enormous glass surfaces, including a wraparound windshield and massive side windows, which led to the car's infamous nickname, the Fish Bowl on Wheels. But here's where the story takes its first tragic turn. The Pacer was originally engineered around a revolutionary Wankel rotary engine that AMC had planned to license from General Motors. This compact, lightweight engine would have been perfect for the car's design philosophy. The rotary engine's small size would have allowed for better weight distribution, improved fuel economy, and the kind of performance that might have actually justified the Pacer's compact car classification. AMC invested heavily in designing the entire front-end structure around this engine, creating specific mounting points and engineering the cooling system specifically for the rotary's unique requirements. Then disaster struck. In 1974, just as the Pacer was nearing production, General Motors made an announcement that sent shockwaves through AMC's engineering department. GM was canceling their rotary engine program. The reasons were multiple: concerns about fuel consumption, emissions regulations, and reliability issues that GM couldn't solve economically. For AMC, this was catastrophic. They had already committed enormous resources to the Pacer project, and changing engines at this late stage would require significant re-engineering. But they had no choice. They couldn't simply cancel the project after spending so much money on development. The solution AMC engineers came up with was to shoehorn in their existing inline six-cylinder engine and, later, an optional V8. These engines were never designed for the Pacer's compact engine bay. The inline-six displaced 232 cubic inches and later 258 cubic inches, while the optional V8 was a massive 304 cubic inch unit borrowed from AMC's larger vehicles. Installing these engines required creative packaging that resulted in a cramped, difficult-to-service engine bay. More critically, it completely destroyed the car's weight distribution and fuel economy. And this is where we get to the heart of the Pacer's fundamental problem. Weight. When AMC marketed the Pacer as a compact car, consumers had certain expectations. They expected a vehicle that weighed somewhere in the range of 2,000 to 2,500 pounds, similar to other compacts of the era like the Ford Pinto or Chevrolet Vega. What they got instead was a car that weighed 1,360 kilograms. That's approximately 3,000 pounds. For perspective, that was heavier than many mid-size sedans of the period. The Pacer weighed more than a contemporary Ford Torino, which was classified as a full-size car by some standards. Why was the Pacer so absurdly heavy? The answer lies in several design decisions that seemed reasonable in isolation, but combined to create a perfect storm of excess weight. First, there was the glass. The Pacer featured more glass area than virtually any other car on the market. Over 50% of the car's surface area was windows. This wasn't ordinary glass either. To meet safety regulations and provide adequate structural integrity, AMC used thick, heavy automotive safety glass. The massive wraparound windshield alone weighed significantly more than a conventional windshield. All those enormous side windows, the large rear glass, and the distinctive bubble-like quarter windows added tremendous weight. Second, the Pacer's unibody structure had to be heavily reinforced to compensate for all that glass. With so much of the car's surface being windows rather than metal, the remaining structure had to be much stronger to maintain crash safety and structural rigidity. AMC engineers added reinforcement beams throughout the body, thickened the A-pillars and B-pillars, and created a robust floor pan structure. This was smart engineering from a safety perspective, but it added hundreds of pounds to the curb weight. Third, federal safety regulations that came into effect in the mid-1970s required much stronger bumpers that could withstand low-speed impacts without damage. The Pacer's bumpers were massive, heavy steel units surrounded by thick rubber guards. Front and rear, these bumpers added significant weight while also compromising the car's styling with their ungainly appearance. Fourth, and perhaps most problematically, those large engines that replaced the planned rotary were substantially heavier than the original design anticipated. An inline-six cylinder engine is inherently heavy due to its length and the substantial engine block required to house 6 cylinders in a row. The optional V8 was even worse, a heavy cast-iron unit that belonged in a muscle car, not a compact commuter vehicle. The result of all this weight was predictable and disastrous for fuel economy. AMC claimed the Pacer would deliver excellent mileage, playing into consumer desires for efficient vehicles during the energy crisis. What buyers actually experienced was fuel consumption of approximately 16 miles per gallon in city driving. 16! For a car marketed as a compact, fuel-efficient alternative to larger vehicles, this was unacceptable. To put this in perspective, many full-size sedans of the era achieved similar or even better fuel economy. The Pacer was delivering essentially the same mileage as a Chevrolet Impala or Ford LTD, which offered far more interior space and carrying capacity. Highway mileage wasn't much better, typically ranging from 20 to 24 miles per gallon depending on driving conditions and which engine was fitted. While this was marginally acceptable, it certainly wasn't the revolution in efficiency that AMC had promised. Buyers who purchased a Pacer thinking they would save money on gas were in for a rude awakening at the pump. The Pacer's weight problem created another serious issue: performance, or more accurately, the complete lack of performance. With that massive curb weight and an engine that was never designed to push such a heavy vehicle, the Pacer was painfully slow. The 0 to 60 miles per hour acceleration time was measured at over 14 seconds in most contemporary road tests. 14 seconds. In an era when even family sedans could achieve 0 to 60 times in the 10 to 12-second range, the Pacer felt dangerously slow when attempting to merge onto highways or pass other vehicles. The manual transmission models were marginally better, shaving perhaps a second off that time, but they were rare. Most buyers opted for the automatic transmission, which made the performance even more lethargic. The automatic gearbox sapped additional power and added more weight, creating a vicious cycle of poor performance. Drivers reported that the Pacer felt genuinely underpowered in real-world driving situations, particularly when fully loaded with passengers or attempting to climb hills. But perhaps the most dangerous issue wasn't even the poor performance. It was a serious mechanical problem that emerged with the inline-six-cylinder engine installation. Because the engine was shoehorned into a space designed for a much smaller rotary unit, the steering linkage had to be routed in a compromised position. In some cases, particularly during hard cornering, or when hitting bumps at certain angles, the engine would shift slightly on its mounts. This movement could cause the engine to contact the steering mechanism, potentially causing the steering to bind or, in extreme cases, lock up entirely. Imagine driving down the highway at 60 miles per hour and suddenly finding your steering wheel won't turn. This wasn't a hypothetical concern. There were documented cases of steering interference causing loss of control. AMC issued several technical service bulletins addressing this problem, recommending modifications to the engine mounts and steering components. But the fundamental issue was that the engine simply didn't fit properly in the space available. It was a band-aid solution to a problem that should never have existed in the first place. The Pacer's quirky design extended beyond its dimensions and weight. One of the car's most distinctive features was its asymmetrical doors. The passenger door was actually 4 inches longer than the driver's door. AMC marketed this as a feature, claiming it made it easier for rear-seat passengers to enter and exit the vehicle. In practice, it was a solution to a problem created by the car's own design. The Pacer was so wide and had such thick pillars that rear-seat access was genuinely difficult. The longer passenger door helped somewhat, but it also meant that the doors were not interchangeable, complicating manufacturing and increasing parts inventory costs. The interior of the Pacer was a strange mix of spaciousness and disappointment. The wide body did create generous shoulder room for front seat passengers. This was genuinely class-leading. 2 adults could sit comfortably across the front bench seat without feeling cramped. However, the rear seat was a different story. Despite the car's width, rear legroom was limited because the wheelbase was so short. The Pacer was wide but stubby, and this packaging meant rear passengers sat in a space that felt confined despite the car's overall bulk. The massive glass area, while creating that distinctive fishbowl appearance, also created serious practical problems. In summer, the Pacer's interior became unbearably hot. All that glass created a greenhouse effect, turning the cabin into an oven. The air conditioning system struggled to keep up, and on particularly hot days, it was simply inadequate. In winter, the opposite problem occurred. All that glass area meant poor insulation, and the heater had to work overtime to maintain comfortable temperatures. Owners reported significantly increased heating and cooling costs due to the engine working harder to power these climate control systems. The glass also created privacy issues. With windows that large and that numerous, anyone sitting in a Pacer was on display to the entire world. There was no discreet travel in a Pacer. You were visible from every angle. This might not seem like a major issue, but many buyers found it uncomfortable, particularly in urban environments where traffic and parking situations put you in close proximity to pedestrians and other vehicles. From a manufacturing perspective, The Pacer was a nightmare for AMC. The unusual body design meant that very few components could be shared with other AMC vehicles. Unlike GM or Ford, which could spread development costs across multiple platforms and badge-engineered variants, AMC couldn't leverage economies of scale. The Pacer's unique windshield, door glass, body panels, and interior components were all specific to this one model. This meant higher per-unit costs and more complex inventory management. The asymmetrical door design, while interesting, complicated the assembly process. Workers couldn't simply install doors in a standardized fashion. They had to pay attention to which door went on which side, adding time and potential for errors on the assembly line. The massive glass panels were difficult to install properly, and quality control issues with window sealing led to numerous customer complaints about water leaks and wind noise. AMC's investment in the Pacer was staggering for a company of its size. The development cost was $60 million. To put this in perspective, AMC's total annual revenue in the mid-1970s was around $2 billion. This single vehicle program consumed 3% of an entire year's revenue for the company. For a small automaker already struggling to compete with the Big Three, this was an enormous financial risk. The company built new tooling, modified assembly lines, and invested in marketing campaigns to promote the Pacer as the car of the future. AMC's CEO at the time bet the company's future on this vehicle's success. Initial sales were actually promising. In its first year, 1975, AMC sold over 145,000 Pacers. This seemed to validate the company's investment and bold design choices. However, this initial success was short-lived. By 1976, sales had dropped to approximately 117,000 units. In 1977, they fell further to 58,000. By 1978, only 20,000 Pacers found buyers. In 1979, the car's fifth and penultimate year of production, sales were under 10,000 units. The final model year, 1980, saw production of just 1,700 Pacers before AMC pulled the plug on the program. In total, over the car's entire production run from 1975 to 1980, AMC manufactured approximately 280,000 Pacers. While this might sound substantial, it was nowhere near enough to recoup the $60 million development cost, let alone generate the profits needed to fund AMC's other operations and future vehicle development. When you factor in the costs of manufacturing, marketing, dealer support, and warranty claims, the Pacer program was a financial catastrophe for the company. The Pacer became AMC's least successful platform in the company's history. This is particularly damaging when you consider that AMC was already the smallest and most financially vulnerable of American automakers. The company couldn't afford a failure of this magnitude. While competitors like Ford could absorb the losses from unsuccessful models like the Edsel because they had multiple successful products generating revenue, AMC had no such cushion. The failure of the Pacer had ripple effects throughout AMC's product lineup. Resources that should have been invested in updating other models or developing new vehicles were tied up in trying to salvage the Pacer program. AMC attempted various modifications to improve the car, adding the V8 engine option, introducing a station wagon variant, updating trim levels and features, but none of these moves reversed the car's declining sales trajectory. The automotive press, initially intrigued by the Pacer's unusual design, became increasingly critical as the car's flaws became apparent. Road tests highlighted the poor fuel economy, inadequate performance, and quality control issues. Consumer Reports couldn't recommend the vehicle. Car and Driver magazine, while appreciating some aspects of the design philosophy, ultimately concluded that the Pacer failed to deliver on its promises. Perhaps most damaging were the reports from actual owners. While some buyers genuinely loved their Pacers and remained loyal to the quirky design, many others experienced significant problems. Engine issues, transmission failures, electrical problems, and rust were common complaints. The car's resale value plummeted faster than almost any other vehicle on the market. Within just 3 years, a Pacer had lost over 70% of its original value, a depreciation rate that made it nearly impossible for owners to trade them in without taking a substantial financial loss. The cultural impact of the Pacer was also problematic for AMC. Rather than being seen as innovative and forward-thinking, the Pacer became something of a joke. Its unusual appearance, poor performance, and quality problems made it an easy target for comedians and critics. The car appeared in movies and television shows, often as a symbol of poor taste or economic hardship. This cultural perception further damaged AMC's brand image and made it harder for the company to market its other products. By the late 1970s, it was clear that the Pacer experiment had failed. AMC's financial situation had deteriorated to the point where the company's independence was threatened. In 1978, AMC formed a partnership with Renault, the French automaker, which purchased a significant stake in the company. This partnership provided needed capital but also marked the beginning of the end for AMC as an independent American manufacturer. The Pacer's legacy is complex. On one hand, it represented genuine innovation and risk-taking at a time when many automakers were playing it safe. The design philosophy of creating a wide, space-efficient, compact car was sound. The extensive use of glass created a unique interior environment that some drivers genuinely enjoyed. The car's distinctive styling ensured it would never be forgotten, which is more than can be said for many anonymous vehicles of the era. On the other hand, the execution was deeply flawed in ways that undermined the entire concept. The loss of the rotary engine during development forced compromises that destroyed the car's fuel efficiency and performance. The excessive weight from the glass and reinforced structure made it a compact car in name only. The quality control issues and mechanical problems created a poor ownership experience for many buyers. The massive development cost, combined with disappointing sales, represented a financial burden that AMC could not afford. In automotive history, the Pacer stands as a cautionary tale about the dangers of compromising a vehicle's core concept during development. If AMC had been able to proceed with the original rotary engine, the Pacer might have been a genuine success. A lightweight, fuel-efficient car with the Pacer's distinctive styling and spacious interior could have found a solid market niche. Instead, the company was forced to make compromises that ultimately doomed the project. The Pacer also illustrates the challenges faced by smaller automakers trying to compete with industry giants. AMC simply didn't have the resources to absorb a failure of this magnitude. When Ford's Edsel failed in the late 1950s, the company could weather the financial loss because it had strong sales in other segments. When the Pacer failed, it helped push AMC toward its eventual demise. The company was fully absorbed by Chrysler in 1987, ending decades of independent operation. Today, the Pacer has achieved a certain cult status among automotive enthusiasts. Surviving examples are often lovingly restored and displayed at car shows, where their unusual styling still turns heads nearly 50 years after production began. Some collectors appreciate the car precisely because it was so different, so willing to break from automotive conventions. The Pacer represents a moment in time when American automakers were willing to take risks and try new approaches. even if those approaches didn't always succeed. But for AMC, the Pacer remains a symbol of missed opportunities and crushing financial losses. $60 million invested in a platform that produced just 280,000 units over 5 years. A car that weighed 1,360 kilograms when it should have been hundreds of pounds lighter. Fuel economy of 16 miles per gallon city when it should have been in the 20s or 30s. Acceleration times over 14 seconds when buyers expected better performance. These numbers tell the story of a promising concept undone by circumstance and compromise. The fishbowl on wheels, as it came to be known, represented American Motors Corporation's last great gamble at innovation and independence. It was a bold vision that, in the end, helped sink the company that created it. The AMC Pacer, a $60 million lesson in how even the most innovative ideas can fail when execution doesn't match ambition.